Hi, good morning. My name is Bella. Welcome to The Parents and Their Journey. This is a platform for friends, family who are experiencing a disability or raising a child with disability. Each story of each individual is very important and it is worth being heard. So today I want to bring to you a very special person and a friend of mine. And I would like for her to share her story to all of you, and hopefully we can all learn from what she's going through and the challenges that she's facing in her life. So I bring to you a very good friend, Erica Virola. Come on over, Erica. There we go. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to share your story. So today I have a bunch of questions for Erica, and hopefully that we can all have a sense of her story about her life. So Erica, tell me a little bit about your childhood, your family, and where you're from.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Southern California. I was actually born in Anaheim, California, and then I was living in Brea, if I don't know if you're familiar, North Orange County area for 3 years, and then I was mostly raised in a city called Diamond Bar. It's East LA, San Gabriel area, and that was where I grew up as a child, where I went to school through preschool through college, in my college years. And I grew up in a family of 4. I'm oldest out of 2 siblings, and my parents are from different cultures, different backgrounds. My dad is from Iran. He came when he was, say, about 19 years old. My mom's actually originally from Texas. And we grew up in a very blended, multicultural family. Overall, had a very happy childhood. I had lived in my childhood home for over 15 years before we actually moved to a different part of the city of Diamond Bar. And it was just fun time until I was diagnosed with my disability. And that was when things eventually changed through school, through how I was raised, how my parents saw me, how others saw me, how just the world saw me in general, and how it made me feel.
I see. So can you tell us about your diagnosis? What was the diagnosis? What was your diagnosis?
My diagnosis came much later. To kind of do like a background of where this was going. So my parents noticed that I was very unbalanced when it came to walking at the age of 1. They had me checked, but not into the full extent. Flash forward to 8 years later, my school age years, I was about 8 when the diagnosis came about. This happened around the time when they had like the vision and hearing tests, the school-wide hearing tests. So my vision was fine. Hearing became a phone call to my parents, and that came into doctor's appointment. They re-screened me and they said, oh, everything's fine, but you were very aware of how the health system was back then in the 90s. It was very hard to get a right then and there referral to see any kind of specialist. It took about months before I was actually fully diagnosed with the hearing loss.
I see.
And they required an audiogram with the audiologist. And I kind of came into hearing aids and everything else.
I see. So walk us through about what challenges you've gone through being diagnosed with hearing loss.
I think the first challenges was that my reaction to it was very emotional. I cried in front of this doctor. His name was Ed Popejoy. I remember him very well, very elderly man, very sweet man. He reassured me that the hearing aids would help. I didn't see it that way because I how is this going to play out with my schooling, with my friends, how my family going to treat me as a young child. So the biggest changes was, aside from my home life, my school life changed dramatically. I was placed basically in the RSP program. So I was introduced, my first day was to be introduced to my RSP teacher. Her name is Mrs.
What is the RSP?
Oh, the resource.
Oh, I see.
The resource. We called it RSP. The acronym is a resource. I'm not sure what the rest of it is.
And this is at school, right?
Yeah. Yes. So that was the first thing. And the other things that happened were that accommodations. For those of you who are not familiar with what I mean by accommodations, special needs children get accommodated. For those who have hearing losses like myself, we are accommodated to get front seating so we can see the teachers. Accommodations if it would mean like for homework. I was actually included in an inclusion kind of setup because I wasn't severe. But it ended up being RSP, it ended up being speech therapy, it ended up being periodic appointments to the school nurse to check my hearing. It ended up going to PE with the deaf kids on campus. So I did a lot of that, and it mostly was just having to be part-time with a resource teacher and part-time with being with other children.
I see. So being at school and having to, it's easier when you are in elementary school, right? When you're diagnosed with something. But when you enter middle school, what was your experience being in the middle school, having diagnosed with hearing loss?
Middle school was actually very interesting, to be honest. I wore my hearing aids daily. I had to wear hearing aids. They were very small, they were not that big. And I was very into academics. I was more comfortable with myself. So the drop-ins that I got from the resource teacher weren't problematic for me. They weren't very like, oh, why is this strange person in my classroom trying to take me out of my classroom kind of thing. So, however, as far as the social aspect, it was very hard because I remember my 8th grade year, things changed. I was a very good student the first year, the 7th or 8th middle school. So my 8th grade year was more of compromising the whole wearing hearing aids, trying to fit in. It was my last year. It's like, what am I gonna do with this? So I noticed because of the lack of confidence that I had in myself, grades slowly dropped, and I was engaging in maybe not the best behavior as far as my language changing, my demeanor changing, and it really did affect me later on, realizing that it wasn't so much about pleasing people, because my peers, they didn't take notice. They just saw me as the quiet child back in elementary school, just an emotional child that was just not easy to talk to, or they wasn't easily being fit in with my peers.
Oh, I see. So moving forward as an adult, wearing your hearing aid, what are the challenges that you go through having to wear that in a daily basis?
Daily basis, so my routine is basically in the morning, I put them on. It's like anyone that has to wear glasses or take their medicine. It's a daily thing. I can't hear without them. A little bit about the hearing loss. It's a nerve damage. It's a neurological damage and internal damage in my ear. It's a bilateral, meaning it's 2 ears. And having to wear them, it helps versus not having to wear them. It's like I hear sounds, I hear noises without them, but there's no speech.
I see.
Once I hear, it's like I kind of have this little joke with my friend, my husband's like, I need to put my ears on. Hold on, let me put on my ears. I can't hear. So that's the one thing it's there, and it's a prolonged day, so I have to have them all day, every day. I mean, they're talking the minute I wake up to the minute I have to take them off at. I
So
think.
do you hear like sounds as like, you know, when you're outside of your home? Because, you know, there's a lot of noise outside. Do you hear them as you wear your hearing aid?
All the time.
All the time. Does that bother you?
All the time.
Does that bother you, or?
It does bother me. So a little background on my hearing aids. My hearing aids now compared to back in the day, there's more control over that obstacle of hearing background noises, hearing excessive noises. So I have the capability of doing that. Before, not so much. So when it comes to one-on-one, I'm okay with, but when it comes to being in a room, being in a lot of people, and having them on, having to adjust the right then and there is very challenging, actually.
I see. So does that put a lot of pressure into your like emotional part because you know, when you hear a lot of noises, wearing your hearing aid, does that affect you emotionally?
It makes me very nervous, actually.
It does.
Very nervous, very uneasy to be around people. My biggest challenge is my speech. I've been told that, oh, you speak fine, you hear fine, but when you ask me questions, it becomes a challenge for me because I would have the tendency to ask the person to repeat themselves.
I see.
And sometimes, unfortunately, the world is not very empathetic with people who have hearing. The biggest misconception is that we sign. But the people who have hearing loss, we sign, like people would sign to me and I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. It's like, do you read lips? They intentionally go like, do you read lips? Do you focus on the face? Like, how do you communicate? And also the biggest thing when I don't reply and I'm very silent, I've had people say, are you mute? Are you ESL? Do you speak in another language? Do you speak? Basically, that's the biggest thing. And then when I say, oh no, I'm sorry, I have a hearing loss, or I have a hearing problem, they kind of don't react in the most friendly way. Since COVID, I've been getting a little bit more empathy towards it because the mask is biggest. It's the biggest thing. It's the mask and not being able to see people's faces, and you're trying to hear. It's just like a block, and then you're like, and then you don't want to be like judgmental when people like can't hear you in the mask. It's like, oh, now you know how I feel, type of thing, like in the back of my mind.
So when someone calls you from afar, they say, Erica, and you don't hear them. Did someone ever come up to you, hey, you don't really hear me, I've been calling you?
I get that a lot, and then I have to, if they don't know, they'll know eventually when I tell them. I see. I think with my hearing loss, it's pitch and it's distance. So if you try to call someone from the back, it's like a wall. The back of your head is like a wall. So we can't hear unless you're like facing forward. And that's where the speech comes in.
I see. So another question that I have is that how does your disability affect you as a person?
Emotionally, it was very hard growing up. I think I shared with you earlier. Emotionally, you're seen as different, but hands down, they can't see you normal. And then it's like I had this biggest belief that between being able to see and being able to hear, hearing is the biggest thing, because if you can't hear, you can't really socialize, you can't really immerse in the culture, and we're a very social society. So to be kind of different in that sense, when you don't look different, it becomes very emotionally, you become very self-conscious. I had a lot of issues with my self-esteem, with my speech, with what I'm capable of doing. It's just going to affect my as a child in the long run, because it's like you're talking about school, you're talking about going to university, finding a job, how people going to perceive me. And emotionally, I was very much not emotionally challenged, but I think in a sense because I wasn't given the words to, I wasn't given the opportunity to speak through my words when people got to me, and it was very emotional. It became down in tears when people asked me to share your story, like in the situation. I would be very emotional about it.
Why is that?
Because I think I didn't know how to cope with my emotions. The word, rather than expressing my emotions in words, it became in tears because of it. Just I didn't learn how to cope with my emotions.
I see. Do you think it has something to do with, like, because you learn to kind of just compress all your feelings inside you, and maybe you're thinking like nobody is going to listen to what I'm going to say. Do you think that has something to do with that too?
Yes. That was the biggest thing. Having a hearing loss, people can tend to mute you in a sense, like you have nothing to say because you have a hearing loss, like you have a hard of hearing. And unfortunately, people will give you the hardest time with it. And it's like, but like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you, why? Like, it's like it's your fault having your disability. It's like you're trying to justify what you're going through, but if the person doesn't understand or have never been there, it's really hard to really connect with people on that level.
I see. Well, I'm sorry about what you went through and what you're still going through in this, in this world. I hope that, other people hearing your story, this platform is really for someone like you who a lot of times doesn't get the opportunity to speak about their to tell about their story. So two more questions that I have for you is that what accomplishments have you have had that you pursue, despite of having a disability?
I think the biggest thing was because I was so ingrained in my academics, immersed in my academics, that I was given awards. I remember in high school, all 4 years honor roll. Elementary school, my grades actually kind of did improve because of the help I was getting, so it was like student of the month. Wow. And then finding out that I was pretty good at writing, I had opportunity to be in a little young writers kind of poetry thing back in elementary school. We did haikus and the other one that I forgot what it was called, and my poem got selected.
Wow.
And it got published in this little book of young poet kind of thing.
Wow.
So that was, it was a game changer when you realize, when you're by yourself all the time, you realize the gift, I was really good at reading, I was really good at writing, I was really excelling in my academics, and I got awarded more for my academics and despite everything else.
Wow, that's amazing. I see you as a person who's really smart, who's dedicated, who's very persevering, and who doesn't let the challenges in life put you down, but instead you rise up, you thrive, and you continue to persevere in this life.
Thank you.
So for someone listening about your story, is there a wisdom, practicals, or practices you can impart to someone listening to your story?
My biggest thing that I've always had to tell myself that I would like to tell others is that the labels that people give you. Unfortunately, when you are diagnosed, especially in school, you have no way of going around it. There's nothing you can do about it. They will diagnose you as a handicapped, disabled person. Unfortunately, that is the school setting. Your classmates will say things like deaf girl. They will say things to you. My biggest thing is how you respond to them, how you react to them, and what you do with them. I think you can't take them off. They will always keep coming at us. And just, if you ever get caught up in that, don't let it get to you. For those of you who have been diagnosed with something like that I have in a later stage of your life, it's very difficult, I understand. Keep going. There is help. Don't be afraid to get help. I was very stubborn getting the help that I needed. I was very stubborn of asking for help because I didn't learn how to go to people. And that's the biggest responsibility that you can do for yourself, is to get the help that you need if you need the help. Another thing is these challenges become walls. They become hurdles. They become stumbling blocks. And I get it. It's how do you keep going if you're a parent that has a child that has to go through hearing, and you consider, does the child need to get, for instance, surgery for it? For me, I don't know what that's like to be in that position. My parents were told that I have a progressive hearing loss, which means I'm not a candidate for surgery, unfortunately. I've been asked if I would go that route. Honestly, I think as hard as it's been, the biggest thing was not doing it. It's the biggest gamble. I'd rather have the hearing that I have versus not being able to hear it at all. And that's the biggest thing, to be able to say to yourself, look in the mirror and say, I can still do this as hard as it is. I've been told so many times I couldn't do it. And here I am, a college graduate.
Yay!
I was back at school. I managed to have that level of integrity in my later days being a student. It's okay to have those walls. It's how you're able to get around those walls and those hurdles, and anything in life. Just keep going.
Erica, thank you so much for really sharing your story from the heart. And we are blessed. I'm blessed to have you as a friend, and your story is worth being heard. So I just wanted to tell you that that you are special. You are one of a kind, and at the same time, you're also an individual who longs to be loved, who longs to be connected, who long friendship, and who are also longing for empathy, sympathy, name it, everything that a person is longing for. A person with a disability also long for all those things. So today we want to leave you with all that, and hopefully that we can all see you again next time. And so thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.